I would like to remind you now of what George Russell said after his shunt in the Australian Grand Prix. What he said after the race in Melbourne. I was half a second behind Fernando, 100 metres before the corner, and then suddenly he came back towards me extremely quickly. It was clear that he had braked earlier than he had done on previous laps and then got back on the throttle. I wasn't expecting that, and it caught me by surprise. I hit the wall, blah, blah, blah. So that's what he said after Melbourne. And as a result, not as a result, that was after it was clear that Fernando was going to get a penalty basically for confusing George. I don't think the stewards really went down the path of this was a brake test, but they didn't have any other way of dealing with it, really. And that's, so he got the penalty. Anyway, this is what George said on Thursday night in Japan before FP1 and FP2 on Friday. I was actually looking at the steering wheel, making a switch change on the straight. And when I looked up, I was on Fernando's gearbox and it was sort of too late. The next thing I know, I'm in the wall. Can you brake in the middle of the straight? I don't know. Nothing more to say, really. Well, there's quite a lot to say, I think, George. Two things. One, you're looking down at the steering wheel when you are only half a second behind another car at about 250 kilometers an hour. I'm amazed. Let's get onto that subject, because I always imagined that drivers never play around with toggles and do all that switch adjustment on the steering wheel if they're in traffic. I'm assuming they usually do that on the straight, approaching a braking area, if they're kind of on their own on the track, they haven't got too many cars around them. It's a little bit like when the engineers talk to the driver. You tend not to do it when he's in the middle of some unbelievable dice breaking into a corner. You try and do it when he's on the straight, when he's a little bit more relaxed. I'm absolutely staggered that George Russell would be doing that when he's only, well, by my calculations, about 30 metres behind Fernando at 250 kilometres an hour. That's very close at that speed. And there he is, having to look down at the dash. I'm looking down now as I speak, kind of what he would be doing on the steering wheel. One, that he would do it then with a car in front of him, and B, that he has to look down anyway. I've always assumed, obviously incorrectly, that the drivers and the engineers work in so much sync, in perfect sync, to the point where their peripheral vision covers everything they need to do on the steering wheel, apart from really difficult things which they have to do with a specific movement which they do on the straight when there's nobody else around them. But generally speaking, I'm imagining they're looking a long, long way ahead, and everything they're doing is done with their near peripheral vision. But quite clearly it isn't, because as George saying, he actually took his eyes off the road to look at the steering wheel. That's what he's saying. I'm actually blown away by that. And it reminds me a little bit of when, years ago, when Goodyear were in Formula One, they used to do a brilliant thing for the British Grand Prix, and they used to invite the press up, the media, to do laps with Grand Prix drivers in Goodyear-tired road cars. Most of them were hot road cars. And this happened for about 5 years. It was a sort of preview to the British Grand Prix. And one year I went up, it was pouring with rain, and I did a lap with Jody Scheckter in a pretty hot Renault blah, I don't know what sort of Renault it was, front wheel drive thing. It wasn't a 5, it was something quite big, I remember that. It was a Renault Gordini spec thing, it was quite a quick car. Anyway, we drove out and it was wet, and we go out of the pit lane into Chapel, the left-hander, then into Beckett's. And he hasn't got the windscreen wipers on. It's pouring with rain, and there's rain all over the place. And we go down the hangar straight, and I look across at Jody, and I said, "Jody, can you see okay?" And he said, "Oh yeah, the wipers," and just put the wipers on. And I asked him later, I said, "Why were you so slow on looking at the wipers?" He said, I never think about it. He said, "I'm always looking so far ahead, I don't even see the windscreen. I'm looking at what's happening at Stowe when I'm coming out of Beckett's." And I thought, wow, that is the difference between me and, mortal me and these superhumans that drive these Grand Prix cars. This unbelievable vision, peripheral vision, and indeed extended vision. And here's George saying, I've got to look down at the steering wheel to do a toggle adjustment, and I've got Fernando Alonso 30 meters in front of me, and we're doing 250 kilometers an hour, and there's 2 laps to go. And he might do something a little bit different. Shouldn't I be watching him? I just find it extraordinary that he does that, and that nobody is now saying the real problem here, the real cause actually, are these steering wheels and how complex they are, and everything we expect the drivers to do, obviously when they're following another car closely at very high speed. It's inevitably going to lead to some accidents, more accidents, I would imagine. So is it not time, I'm thinking to myself, where maybe we start redesigning what the drivers can actually have on the steering wheel? Take away some of all these switches, take away the switches, because at the moment, it's obviously distracting. I mean, this what George is actually saying there is basically what the police used to say when they were banning mobile phone use driving a road car. And I remember listening to one scientist or medic scientist who was saying that even talking remotely is a distraction from actually driving. So drivers talk on the radio, and they're playing with all the toggle switches, and they're following Fernando Alonso 30 meters behind at 250 kilometers an hour. And then there's another point here. He says, can you brake in the middle of the straight? Well, it wasn't the middle of the straight, George. That was the other thing. And I find it extraordinary that he said that, because it's like it's becoming a different accident to the one that actually took place. It wasn't the middle of the straight. It was 100 meters before the corner. Well, 100 meters early, he braked 100 meters earlier, touched the brakes 100 meters earlier than he normally would. That doesn't mean to say it's halfway down the straight. No way. And yet he's saying there, he's now in his memory, I guess he's thinking that Fernando did that halfway down the straight, which isn't the case. So I'm pretty amazed by all that. And if there's no reaction to what George is now, I suppose the final point, actually, I should make it, is that if he was playing with the toggle switches and looked up and suddenly saw that Fernando had braked a little bit earlier, why didn't he say that at the time in Melbourne? Why is that only coming out now? No mention of playing with the toggle switches. In fact, what George is doing there is basically repeating everything that's just been discussed in the stewards meeting, and you know, that 100-meter stuff and all that. So and Fernando going down a gear and up a gear. That's all the stuff that came out in the stewards from the telemetry, and he's just repeating there. What he's not doing is telling the full story, which is that, well, you know, I was looking down, I wasn't paying attention at the time. And I wonder if he'd said that, whether Fernando would have got the penalty. And you say, well, why am I going on about it now? Water under the bridge, as a lot of people love to say so many times. I say this because this is all under the heading of brake testing. Was it a brake test? Was it not? I said from day one, to me, it wasn't a brake test. But I have said many times now on live streams and on this channel and on these vids, that if that was considered to be a brake test, then the penalty was nothing like stern enough, strict enough, because it shouldn't be just a drive-through penalty or a 20-second penalty or 3 points on your license. It should be much more than that. Brake testing is horrendously dangerous. And so this opens now, having said that, that opens another door now, doesn't it? Because actually not paying attention to the car in front also is very dangerous, because you can't predict. I mean, Fernando, he may not have intentionally come off the power a little bit sooner or touch the brakes a bit sooner. It may have been because something had happened to the car and the car had felt weird, or the brakes had gone, or something else had happened. And you've got to, if you're following a car closely at that speed, you've got to be ready for the guy in front not to be doing exactly the same thing that he'd done the previous lap. Surely, that, particularly with 2 laps to go in the race, you know, it's a long race, anything can happen. And, you know, we already had 1 brake failure in that race. So why would you be so confident that Fernando is going to be doing exactly the same thing, that you're looking down at the dash, doing a toggle adjustment at massively high speed with no distance between you and the car in front? I just don't get it. And to me, that is the real point that needs to be discussed. And that is almost as dangerous, I've got to say, as brake testing deliberately. I know this wasn't deliberate in George's case, but and he's probably not to blame for this, because you load the drivers up with enough engineering tools, they're going to use them, and they have got to drive the lap, and they have got to race against other cars. And really, I feel quite sorry for George if that was the case, because he's an unbelievably good racing driver. And here he is, when he should have been racing Fernando and thinking about positioning and seeing that he suddenly brakes a little bit earlier, maybe move to the right, get inside him. There he is, faffing around with the toggle switches on the steering wheel. You know, that's wrong. And that's 2024 modern Formula One racing out of control, in my opinion.